Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before we get started, a quick reminder to like and subscribe to our channel and smash that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our future deep dives. Today, we're going to be tackling a topic that I think is super relevant, especially if you're a UPSC aspirant or, honestly, just curious about how the world really works. Money laundering.
Absolutely.
And the best part, we're not just diving into boring textbooks. We're looking at some real-world stories, shocking statistics, even this ancient system called Hawala.
Yeah.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
But don't worry, our expert is here to break it all down.
Definitely.
We'll uncover how criminals try to make their dirty money, look totally legit. And more importantly, why you listening right now should actually care about all of this. Ready to dive in?
Let's do it. Money laundering, you see, it's not just about hiding cash, under your mattress. It's about criminals wanting to actually use their ill-gotten gains, money made from, let's say, drug trafficking or even terrorism, and they want to do it without raising any eyebrows.
So it's not just about making the money disappear. It's like giving it a brand new identity, like a witness protection program, but for cash.
Huh. That's a great analogy. Imagine like a big-time criminal, right? Pulls off this massive heist, ends up with millions in cash. Well, they can't just walk into a bank and deposit it all, can they?
Right.
No way. They need to make it look like that money, all those millions, came from somewhere legitimate.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So that's where money laundering comes in. It's like the art of disguise, but for dirty cash.
You got it. And just like, any good magician, they have a playbook. A 3-step process we call placement, layering, and integration. It's like a play in 3 acts.
Placement, like Act 1.
Yeah.
That's got to be the grand entrance of the dirty money, right?
Exactly. You got to introduce those illegal funds into the financial system. Criminals try to, sneak it in under the radar. And one tactic they use is called smurfing.
Smurfing. Like those cute little blue cartoon guys.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, the name's a bit deceiving. It actually involves breaking down large sums of money into smaller deposits, spread across multiple accounts, sometimes even using different people to make those deposits. Those folks, the Smurfs, they're often clueless that they're, part of this bigger scheme.
So it's like divide and conquer, but for money. Trying to blend in with the crowd. But, banks must have ways to catch this, right?
They do. But money launderers, they have to get creative, right? The rise of online banking, actually, it's made smurfing easier in a way. Criminals can use multiple accounts, platforms. It's all digital now.
Oh, that's a good point. Technology really is a double-edged sword, isn't it? Makes things easier for the criminals and for those trying to catch them. Okay, so let's say they've managed to get the money into the system. What happens next? What's Act 2, layering?
Layering is where it gets really, really tricky. Imagine creating a maze of transactions. You're moving money through all these different channels to make it basically untraceable.
Okay.
And to do that, they often use shell companies.
Shell companies. Those are essentially businesses that exist only on paper, right? No actual operations, just a front to hide the money.
Precisely. They might create fake invoices for goods and services that were never actually traded. Or they move money through offshore accounts and tax havens. Makes it much harder for the authorities to follow.
It's like a complex web, like bouncing the money around like a hot potato until it's lost all its scent, huh?
Uh-huh. I like that. And don't forget, we live in a globalized world, so these criminals can move money across borders like that. Makes it even harder to track.
A global game of hide and seek. Okay, the money's been shuffled, hidden in plain sight. What's the grand finale?
Integration.
Ah, integration.
Yeah.
That's where that seemingly clean money gets reintroduced into the legitimate economy. They might, buy luxury goods, invest in real estate, even donate to charities, build that aura of respectability.
Wow, it's like they're giving their dirty money a whole new resume, trying to make it a model citizen. In a way, yeah. They invest in legitimate businesses, set up trusts, could even fund political campaigns, anything to legitimize their ill-gotten gains, let's say.
Okay, so they take the money from dirty to squeaky clean.
Yeah.
But why go through all this trouble? Why not just keep the cash tucked away somewhere?
Well, they want to enjoy their wealth, of course. They want to buy houses, cars, businesses, live a life of luxury. But without raising suspicion, right?
They want to blend in with the crowd, just with a much bigger bank account.
Exactly. And that's why understanding money laundering is so crucial. It's not just a crime in itself. It's the fuel that powers so many other criminal activities like drug trafficking, terrorism, corruption.
That's a bit scary when you think about it like that.
It is, and to make matters even more complex, you have systems like Hawala that operate completely outside the traditional banking channel.
Koala, yeah. It sounds almost mythical, like something out of an ancient legend.
It is pretty ancient, but it's still very much in play today. Hawala is this informal, trust-based system. It's been around way longer than modern banking systems.
Wow.
Relies on a network of brokers called hawaladars, and they facilitate these transfers based on trust, personal connections.
Okay, so no bank accounts, no wire transfers, just, what, a network of people vouching for each other?
Exactly. Let's say you want to send money to someone in, I don't know, another country using Hawala.
Okay.
You would give them money to a hawaladar, right, in your country. And then they would contact their counterpart in the recipient's country.
Okay, but how does the money actually get to the person? I mean, does it physically travel across borders?
That's the fascinating part. It doesn't. It's all based on this system of credits and debits within that Hawala network. So the hawaladar in the recipient's country, they just pay out the same amount but in local currency to the recipient.
It's like a financial handshake then, a system built on promises and reputation.
Exactly. And because it operates completely outside, banks and all that, Hawala doesn't leave much of a paper trail. Makes it very hard to track, very hard to regulate.
Right. And I can see how criminals would be all over that, trying to move money under the radar. But wouldn't this be vulnerable to, fraud? What if a hawaladar just runs off with the money?
Well, that's the risk you take with any trust-based system. The entire network relies on the integrity and reputation of those hawaladars. One weak link, and it all falls apart.
Wow. So trust is really the currency here. It's amazing how something so ancient is still playing a role in, the modern financial world, even if it's often linked to illegal activities.
It shows you how human ingenuity, for better or worse, can create these systems that operate outside the conventional structures.
Right.
But speaking of modern challenges, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, right? Cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, Bitcoin and all its digital cousins, they've been all over the news, both for their potential and, well, the risks.
Exactly. Cryptocurrencies, they're decentralized, Promise of anonymity. It's become this new avenue for criminals to move and launder money.
I can see why. It's like, what, a digital hawala, but with even less oversight.
You could say that. Cryptocurrency transactions are hard to trace, which makes it tough for the authorities to follow the money. And this has made them very appealing, especially for things like terrorist financing, where staying anonymous is key.
So it's a cat and mouse game then. Criminals exploiting new technologies and law enforcement trying to keep up. It sounds like fighting money laundering really requires a global effort. You're constantly adapting to new trends and new technologies.
You're absolutely right. It's not just about catching the bad guys. You have to understand the whole web of factors that makes money laundering possible and then address them at the source.
I see. So we've talked about the how of money laundering, but I'm curious about the why. Why should we, like regular people, care about any of this? What's at stake here?
Imagine a world where criminals can just, freely enjoy all that dirty money, where it fuels even more crime, more corruption, undermines the rule of law, destabilizes economies. That's what's at stake.
So it's not just a victimless crime. It affects all of us.
Absolutely. It's a threat to our security, to our prosperity, to, our way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And the scale of this problem is, it's pretty staggering.
Yeah.
The International Monetary Fund, they estimate that something like 5% of the entire world's GDP is laundered every single year.
Wow, that's a lot of money. But how does that impact, our daily lives? Can we actually feel that?
Well, think about it. Money laundering, it distorts markets. It can fuel inflation. It makes it harder for legitimate businesses to compete.
Right.
It weakens the entire financial system, makes it harder for governments to collect taxes, and ultimately it robs us of resources that could be used for so many important things: education, healthcare, infrastructure.
It's like a hidden tax we're all paying.
Yeah.
It chips away at our well-being, our prosperity.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the economics, right?
Yeah.
Money laundering, it empowers criminal organizations, it fuels corruption, it makes people lose trust in institutions.
Right. Okay.
It creates a world where crime pays. And that's dangerous for any society.
That's a sobering thought. But there must be, surely there are efforts to combat all this, right? Isn't there a global fight against money laundering?
Absolutely. And that's what we'll be exploring in part 2 of our deep dive. We'll take a look at the frameworks in place to combat money laundering, both here in India and around the world.
Okay.
We'll dive into the laws, the agencies involved, the global cooperation, everything aimed at stopping this financial crime.
Great. We'll learn about the good guys fighting back, their strategies, and the challenges they face. Stay tuned, folks. The deep dive continues in part 2.
Welcome back to the deep dive. In this part, we're going to take a closer look at some real-world examples of money laundering techniques, particularly those relevant to India. These techniques, they're often more complex than you might imagine.
That's right. In the last part, we talked about shell companies as a way to kind of, disguise the origins of dirty money. Can you give us some concrete examples of how criminals actually use these shell companies in the Indian context?
Okay, so let's imagine a scenario, right? You have a corrupt official, let's say, who wants to hide their ill-gotten gains. They could set up a shell company, maybe a fake, consulting firm, or a fictitious import-export business. And this company, it exists solely on paper, no real employees or operations.
Okay, so it's like a ghost company, a facade to hide behind.
Precisely. Now, this shell company, it creates these fake invoices for services that were never rendered or goods that were never actually traded. The corrupt official then transfers their illegal funds to the shell company's bank account as payment for these, fictitious transactions.
So it's all about creating that illusion of legitimate business activity. But wouldn't banks eventually become suspicious of these transactions? Especially with, the increasing scrutiny on financial flows in India.
Well, that's where the complexity comes in. To avoid detection, money launderers, they create these elaborate webs of transactions, moving the money through multiple shell companies, sometimes even across international borders.
It's like a financial shell game then, moving the money so quickly and deceptively that it becomes, nearly impossible to track.
Exactly. And they might use techniques like what we call round tripping. So the money is sent abroad and then brought back into India, disguised as foreign investment.
Okay.
Makes it much harder for authorities to determine the original source of those funds.
So they're exploiting the complexities of global finance, basically, to their advantage. But what about techniques that are more specific to the Indian context? We talked earlier about Hawala. How does that system play a role in money laundering in India?
Hawala remains a significant challenge in India, despite efforts to crack down on it. It's often used to move money out of the country illegally, avoiding taxes, currency regulations.
So it's not just about hiding the origins of the money. It's about what? Evading the legal frameworks, the rules that govern financial transactions.
Exactly. So, for instance, someone might use Hawala to send money abroad, maybe to buy property, invest in assets, without declaring it to the authorities.
So they're bypassing the official channels,
Yeah.
operating in the shadows of the financial system.
Exactly. And the trust-based nature of Hawala, it makes it very difficult to infiltrate, to disrupt. It relies on these close-knit networks, personal connections, often within specific communities or regions.
So it's not just a financial system, it's a social network too.
And that makes it even more challenging to tackle. But India, they've recognized the threat posed by Hawala and have taken steps to kind of strengthen its enforcement mechanisms. The Enforcement Directorate, for instance, they've been actively investigating and prosecuting Hawala operators.
That's good to know. Sounds like a constant battle trying to stay one step ahead of those who are exploiting these informal systems.
Yeah.
But beyond these, specific techniques, I'm curious about the broader impact of money laundering on India. What are the economic consequences of all this, this illicit activity?
Money laundering has a corrosive effect on India's economy.
Right.
It undermines growth, distorts markets, weakens the financial system. It's like a hidden cancer, slowly eating away at the foundations of our economic well-being.
That's a powerful analogy. Can you break down the impact a little further? What are some of the key economic consequences?
One of the most significant impacts is the loss of tax revenue.
Right.
When criminals, they launder money, they're essentially evading taxes,
Yeah.
which deprives the government of funds that could be used for essential services, healthcare, education,
Yeah.
infrastructure.
So it's like stealing from the public purse, taking resources away from those who need them most.
Precisely. And this loss of revenue, it has this ripple effect, right? It weakens the government's ability to invest in key sectors, which hinders economic growth and development. So it creates this vicious cycle. Money laundering weakens the economy, which in turn makes it harder to fight crime, to fight poverty.
Okay, so it's not just about criminals, getting rich. It's about undermining the very fabric of our economic well-being.
Exactly. And money laundering also, it can distort markets.
Right.
For instance, it can artificially inflate prices in sectors, let's say, real estate.
Right.
And this can create these bubbles that, eventually burst, harming genuine investors, destabilizing the economy.
Like injecting poison into the economic bloodstream, creating these imbalances and instability.
Another consequence is the damage it does to legitimate businesses. Money laundering, it creates this uneven playing field, you see.
Right.
It allows criminals to unfairly compete with honest businesses who are trying to play by the rules.
So it's not just about the criminals benefiting, it's about undermining those who are trying to do things the right way.
And that's why it's so important for India to have a robust anti-money laundering framework. Legislation like the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, the PMLA, it's been crucial in, providing authorities with the tools they need to investigate and prosecute money laundering offenses.
We've talked a lot about the PMLA in previous episodes. Can you remind our listeners about its key features and how it aims to combat money laundering?
Sure. So the PMLA, it criminalizes the process of, making illegally obtained funds appear legitimate.
Yeah.
It gives authorities the power to seize assets, those believed to be proceeds of crime. And it establishes a framework for international cooperation to actually track down money launderers and their ill-gotten gains.
So it's about hitting criminals where it hurts, their wallets. But enforcing these laws, it must be incredibly challenging, especially given, all the complex techniques we discussed. What are some of the key agencies involved in this fight?
Well, India has several specialized agencies that are dedicated to combating financial crime.
Right.
The Enforcement Directorate, as we mentioned earlier, they are really at the forefront of investigating and prosecuting money laundering cases. They have the power to conduct raids, seize assets, arrest individuals involved in these activities.
So they're the ones on the ground, following the money trail and bringing the criminals to justice.
Exactly. And then there's the Financial Intelligence Unit India, the FIUIND. They play a crucial role in analyzing financial transactions, identifying suspicious patterns, and then sharing that information with law enforcement agencies.
So they're like the detectives of the financial world, piecing together the puzzle, looking for clues.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And there are other agencies involved as well. The Reserve Bank of India, they played a key role in regulating the banking sector and preventing money laundering through financial institutions.
It sounds like a coordinated effort with different agencies, working together to tackle this complex problem.
That's right. And beyond the domestic efforts, India is also actively collaborating with international organizations like the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF.
Ah, the FATF. We've heard that name before.
Yeah.
Can you remind us about their role in the global fight against money laundering?
So the FATF, they set global standards for combating money laundering and terrorist financing. They monitor countries to ensure they're implementing these standards effectively, and they have the power to blacklist countries that fail to comply.
So they're like the watchdogs of the international financial system, setting the rules and making sure everyone's playing by them. But how effective is this blacklisting? Does it actually deter countries from, engaging in money laundering?
The FATF's blacklisting, it certainly has had an impact. It can damage a country's reputation, make it harder to access international finance. It can even lead to economic sanctions.
Wow.
Pakistan, for instance, was placed on the FATF's gray list back in 2018 and only recently came off it after implementing a series of reforms to strengthen its anti-money laundering framework.
Okay, so that's a significant example then. It shows that the FATF's actions can they can have real consequences. But beyond blacklisting, what are some of the other ways that, international cooperation is helping to combat money laundering?
Well, countries are they're increasingly sharing information and intelligence with each other to track down money launderers and their assets. They're also working together to harmonize regulations and standards to close loopholes and create a more level playing field.
So it's about building a global network of cooperation. Sharing knowledge, coordinating efforts to tackle, this transnational crime.
Exactly. And this cooperation it's crucial because money laundering is a global problem that requires a global solution. No single country can fight this alone.
That's a powerful message. It sounds like India has taken this fight, seriously, both domestically and on the international stage.
Absolutely. And the fight, it's far from over. As criminals become more sophisticated, so do the methods of money laundering.
Right. Which brings us to a crucial question. How can we stay ahead of the curve? What are some of the challenges and potential solutions for the future of, this fight? We'll explore these questions in the final part of our deep dive, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive.
In this final part, we're going beyond the headlines, exploring some of the bigger questions and challenges facing this whole fight against money laundering. It seems like as technology, keeps advancing and financial systems get more complex, while this battle against illicit finance, it just keeps evolving too.
It really is a constant game of cat and mouse. Both sides are constantly adapting their strategies. So the question becomes, where do we go from here? What are some of the key areas we need to focus on to make this fight more effective? That's a great question. We've talked about the techniques, the impacts, the frameworks that are in place to combat money laundering. But what are we missing? What are the gaps, the vulnerabilities that need to be addressed?
One of the most pressing challenges is, well, the need for even greater international cooperation. As we've discussed, money laundering is a transnational crime. It knows no borders. Criminals can easily move money across countries, exploiting differences in regulations and enforcement.
So it's not enough for each country to have its own strong laws. They need to actually work together, share information, really coordinate their efforts.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where one country has, really robust regulations, but its neighbor has weaker controls. Well, criminals could exploit that gap, moving money through that weaker link in the chain.
It's like having a strong fortress, but with a weak back door. It undermines the entire defense.
That's a great way to put it. And this cooperation, it needs to go beyond just sharing intelligence. It also requires harmonizing regulations and standards across different countries to close those loopholes, to create a more level playing field. Otherwise, it's like playing whack-a-mole. Criminals just shift their operations to wherever the controls are weaker.
So it's about creating this global web of defense, a network of countries working together to really close the net on these criminals. But even with strong international cooperation, there's still that challenge of enforcement. We've talked about the agencies involved here in India, but how do we make sure they have the capacity to keep up with, these increasingly sophisticated methods of money laundering?
That's a critical point. Law enforcement agencies, they need the resources, the expertise, the training to really effectively investigate and prosecute these cases. This includes investing in technology, data analytics, to better track the financial flows, identify those suspicious patterns.
So it's about giving the good guys the tools they need to keep pace with the bad guys.
Exactly. We have to give our law enforcement the ability to unravel these complex transactions, follow that money trail across borders, and ultimately dismantle those criminal networks.
And it's not just about law enforcement, is it? We talked about the role of financial institutions in all of this, in detecting and reporting any suspicious activity. So how can we strengthen that front line of defense?
Financial institutions, they are absolutely crucial in this. They're the gatekeepers. They're in a unique position to really identify and report, those red flags. This requires strengthening what we call Know Your Customer KYC norms, enhancing due diligence procedures, and really providing ongoing training to those bank staff to help them spot suspicious transactions.
So it's about creating this culture of vigilance within the financial sector, empowering those employees to be the eyes and ears in this fight.
Precisely. And beyond that, beyond the formal financial sector, we also have to address, the challenges posed by those informal systems like Hawala. Those networks, they operate outside the traditional channels, which makes them, very difficult to track and regulate.
It's like trying to catch smoke. It's so elusive, constantly shifting.
That's a great analogy. Tackling Hawala requires a multi-pronged approach. It involves strengthening border controls, enhancing surveillance of suspected operators, and collaborating with other countries to really track down those cross-border transactions. But it also requires addressing the underlying reasons why people use Hawala in the first place.
So it's not just about enforcement, it's about understanding those social and economic factors that actually drive people to use those informal systems.
Exactly. In some cases, it might just be a matter of convenience or maybe cultural norms, but in other cases, it could be because of a lack of access to those formal financial services or even a distrust of, the traditional banks and institutions.
So part of the solution then involves promoting financial inclusion. Expanding access to banking services, building that trust in the formal financial system.
Exactly. We need to make the legitimate system, more appealing, more accessible than that, that shadow economy. And of course, we can't forget about the elephant in the room, right? Cryptocurrency. The rise of digital currencies has really added a whole new dimension to this fight.
Yeah, cryptocurrencies, with their decentralized nature, the promise of anonymity, it's become a haven for, criminals seeking to move money under the radar.
It's a new frontier, a digital Wild West, you could say, that presents both, challenges and opportunities in this fight against financial crime. On one hand, that anonymity, that decentralized nature, it makes them, makes them attractive to money launderers.
It's almost like a digital version of Hawala then, but with even less oversight.
You could say that. But on the other hand, the underlying technology, blockchain, which powers cryptocurrencies, it actually offers some potential solutions for enhancing, transparency, traceability in financial transactions.
So it's a double-edged sword then. How can we harness the power of this technology, though, to actually combat money laundering?
One approach is to regulate those cryptocurrency exchanges, requiring them to implement KYC and anti-money laundering procedures. Similar to, traditional financial institutions, this would bring cryptocurrencies into the regulatory fold, holding them to the same standards as other financial players.
So it's about leveling that playing field, ensuring the same rules apply whether you're dealing with, dollars or Bitcoin.
Exactly. Another approach is to develop tools and technologies that can analyze blockchain data, right? Identify those suspicious patterns, track the flow of illicit funds.
It's about using technology to fight technology, right? Leveraging the power of blockchain to enhance transparency and traceability.
Precisely. And it's not just about the technology and the regulations either. We also need to educate the public
Right.
about the risks, right? The risks associated with cryptocurrencies, and to promote responsible, investment practices.
It's about empowering individuals to be informed participants in this new financial landscape, understanding both the potential and the pitfalls.
You got it. As the world of finance continues to evolve, this fight against money laundering will require constant adaptation, innovation, and a willingness to embrace new technologies, new approaches. It's a global challenge that demands a global response, a collective effort to really safeguard our economies, our societies, our future.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into this complex world of money laundering. We've explored the techniques, the impacts, the challenges, the ongoing efforts to combat this global menace. It's a fight that really does require a collective effort, a shared commitment to upholding the rule of law and protecting the integrity of our financial systems.
A fight that affects us all, and we all have a role to play in it.
And remember, folks, you can be a part of the solution. Be informed, be vigilant, and if you see something, say something. Report any suspicious activity to the authorities. Together, we can make a difference. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.